logs and avoiding the cars. We are going to be building the bare basics of this game, leaving you to add styling and any other features at the end. By the end of this tutorial, you should be familiar with the following methods and properties. Okay, so let's get building. Okay, so let's do it. Let's build a Frogger game. So all I'm going to do is start off on WebStorm and I'm going to create a new project. This is going to be an empty project and I'm just going to call this Frogger and just click create. So that is creating my project for me. At the moment, just an empty directory. So we need to go ahead and add a new file. That's right, it's going to be an HTML file, which I'm going to call index. So thank you, WebStorm. So if you're not using WebStorm, then please just go ahead and type out index.html. And here is some boilerplate code that has been generated for me. So I'm going to put in the title Frogger. This is not going to show up in the browser, okay? This is going to show up in the tab. So if I just go ahead and open this up using this shortcut right here, you will notice that Frogger is showing up here, okay? So that is what this title tag does. For those of you who do not have WebStorm, you can also open this file by just copying the path to it. So copy the absolute path and then just simply paste it into your browser like so. So two options for you. I'm just going to go ahead and inspect this page and get up our console logs as well. So how are we going to make our game of Frogger? Well, if you watch my tutorials, I do usually like to add elements in here with JavaScript, but sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes it's actually better just to start making the game from the HTML file itself, and this is one of those occasions. So I'm going to actually build the grid in HTML and then add functionality to the grid. And my game of Frogger is going to be 9 by 9 squares. Okay, so this is what the game is going to look like as a reminder again. And I'm going to go ahead and create those 81 squares in the index.html file. So the reason I actually just want to do it in the index.html is just because each div is going to have a different class. I'm essentially going to draw out what I want the starting state of the grid to look like. So let's give the wrapping div the class of grid, as that is going to be our game board. And in here, I'm going to actually start making my divs. So we're going to have 1 div, 2, 3, 4, and then this one, I'm going to give it the class of ending block. So this is essentially where you want to get to, that symbolize the end of the game. And then I'm just going to have a few more of these. So 13 to be exact. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And now it's going to get interesting. So now I'm going to get a div, and this div essentially is going to symbolize the row in our grid where all the logs are going left. So that's why I'm actually going to give it a class of log left. I'm going to copy that. I'm just going to paste this out. Whoops. 9 times, as it is a 9 by 9 square. So there's one whole entire row of logs going left and then one whole entire row of logs going right. So I'm going to use Control G and change these to log going right. Now, whilst we might want to give them the same styling, we will know that they have different classes, and we will know that we can essentially know which direction the logs are going to be going on these rows. Okay, so good. And now I'm just going to add a row of empty divs. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now, just like we did with the logs, we're going to do the same for cars going left and cars going right. So Obviously, we have to look out for the cars. So I'm actually going to take all of these again. And this time I'm just going to replace log with car. So Control C, Control G, all the way down. So I'm selecting all of them. And there we go. And let's do 2 more rows of divs. So there's 9 divs, there's another 9 divs. And now we're also going to have to put the starting block in here. So I'm going to do so from the 5th one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just in here, and I'm going to give this class starting block. Okay, so like I said, at the moment we won't see much, but that is what the styling is for. So let's go ahead and style it up. So all I'm going to do is link up my style sheet using the link tag, which is a self-closing tag, and I'm going to do rel style sheet type style type text CSS, and the H reference for this, well, I know that my style sheet is going to live in the root of my project, so I'm just going to type style CSS, and I'm going to create a file called styles CSS, which is going to live on the root, which is why I've just literally typed out the name of my file like this. We don't need to go anywhere, it's just that file. Okay, so we've linked up the style sheet. Now let's add some styling. So the things we're going to have to style up, well, I'm actually going to style my grid to make sure that everything in it fits the way it should. So I can look for the class, dot is for class of grid. Let's make this maybe a little bit bigger. And I'm going to say that my grid, I'm going to give it a border of 1 pixel solid, and we can make it black. Okay, so now if I look in here, it's just 1 line, okay, because we haven't given it a height or a width. So what I'm going to do is say that I want it to be 180 pixels height and 180 pixels width. So that is now going to look like this. However, if we then give styling to all the divs that live inside the grid, so this is how I can do it. I can grab the element with the class of grid. So I'm literally looking in here. I'm like, oh, what has a class of grid? This does. And now I want to say that every div that lives inside of it, so every div that lives inside of it, this is the syntax for doing. So it's going to have a height of, well, because I chose 180 here, 180 divided by 9 is 20. So I'm going to put 20 pixels and width 20 pixels, so that exactly 9 divs fit in my square along the width and the height. Okay, so that is all I have done. So now if you look in here, and I can actually look at the elements that make up this page. So there's my body, there's the div with the class of grid, and inside you'll see all the divs. You will see each div is 20 by 20. Woo! However, they go all the way down. We don't want this. We want them to fit inside the square, right? So I'm going to do so easily by adding display flex. Now you think that would work, but all display flex does is make sure that all the divs fit. However, just fit on the I guess as if you just squash them together in a box. So they're no longer 20 pixels wide, they're 2.25 pixels wide, because that's the only way we can fit 81 squares on here. So I'm going to also add flex wrap. Okay, so there we go. So now all the squares are fitting in here. They're essentially going like this, they're wrapping. So they're going starting from here and going ooh, and then they're starting on this row going ooh, and so on and so on and so on. You'll see as I highlight, you will see the corresponding element being highlighted in the inspect tool on the right. So great, we've done that. Now let's get to adding some more classes, some more styling to the classes, sorry. So let's first off style the ending block. So once again, I'm going to grab the class name of ending block, and I'm just going to actually give it a background color of, let's go ahead and give it red. So because we know this is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th square, where do you think it will be? I think it will be 5th, so somewhere here. And there it is. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's do the same for the starting block now. So starting block, and let's say the starting block is going to be blue. So all we've done is add a class to this block right here. Did we miss? It seems we need to add one more div because our divs stopped there. So let's go ahead and add one more div. We seem to have missed one to the bottom, which actually means I want to move this one to be here instead because I want to be the 5th from the end. And there we go. So we've added those. Let's continue adding more styling. So let's pick out the log left this time. And I'm going to say that log left and actually log right. So we can do it this way. Or we could just give them all the same class, but I'm going to choose to do it this way. And I'm going to give them the background color of light blue. So now that we know where that is, it's here. We've essentially made like a sort of, I guess, river that we have to cross where all our logs here are going left, or that's what we plan, and all the logs here are going to be going right. So that's what we've done. Let's do the same for anything with the cars now. So I'm going to pick out car left. So dot car left and dot car right. And I'm going to give it a background color, maybe of like light gray this time, because this is going to symbolize a road that we need to cross. And once again, it seems we have missed a very important div. So maybe let's fix that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we're going to add one here. And then we need to get rid of one of these. Okay, so hopefully you are now at this place where you have this kind of styling. If you are, great. If not, please check out the code that I have shared in the description below. This is what your game should look like at the moment. And now it's nearly time, actually. Let's go ahead and add a few more things to our HTML before moving on. So we've made our grid. The other thing that I want to actually show in here is how many seconds we have left. So I'm just going to go ahead and add an H3 tag that's going to say seconds left, and essentially we're going to count down the seconds. So I'm going to add a span tag, and the span tag, so make sure that says span, it's going to show us the time we have left. So I'm just going to hard code a 20 in here for now, but I'm also going to pick out the span tag by giving it an ID, and I'm going to give it the ID of time left. So we've done that. I'm also going to do the same for result. So H3 result. And once again, I'm going to give it a span tag like so. And I'm going to give this an ID of result. Okay, which we're just going to leave like that, or we can hard code it as a 0. I'm also going to give a space here just to space this out a little bit. And great. One other thing I'm actually going to add is a start pause button. So here is a button and it's going to say start the game or pause the game if we want. And let's pick it out. So I'm going to give an ID of start pause button. Okay, so I think we've got everything now. So the only thing we've got left to do, so after all of this has been loaded, we then want to go to our JavaScript file. So I'm going to make a script tag, and I'm just going to do the source, which is going to be the app.js file, which we are yet to make. So let's go ahead and make that. Make sure that's at the bottom of your body tag, so in between the two body tags after all the HTML that you have just written. So let's make a new file. This time it's a JavaScript file. I'm going to call it app, which is just showing up here as app.js. Thank you, WebStorm, for doing that for me. And let's start picking stuff out. So first things first, let's actually pick out everything in here. I need to pick out this span element, and I'm going to do so by the ID. So in my app file, I'm going to use document and a JavaScript method called query selector. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Query selector, making sure that's with a capital S, query selector, and I'm looking for the element with the ID of time left. So this needs to be an ID, and let's say this is something. I'm going to save this as the time left display, just like so. So we've got the time left display. The next thing we need to pick out, so let's go ahead, let's go looking in our file again. So we need the query selector, and let's go looking for the span with the ID result. So I'm looking for an element with the ID. This means ID of result, and let's save this as result display. You got it. You can, of course, call it whatever you wish. So we picked out those things. Let's also pick out the button. So once again, document query selector, and let's go looking for the ID of start pause button. I'm going to save this as the start pause button. Great. So I think this might be it for now. Actually, let's go ahead and pick out all these squares as well. So every single little div that I made. So let's save this as squares, and I'm going to use document and query selector. This time all, because I want to pick out all the divs that live in the div with the class name of grid. So the dot is saying that I'm going to go looking in here, I'm looking in here, and I'm looking for anything with a class name of grid. This dot means class name, so I'm looking for that, but then I'm also looking for only the divs inside of it. Okay, so I'm looking for all of these, and I'm saving them under the const squares. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's carry on. So first off, I just want to add a little green square, which is going to be my frog, and I want to essentially add it to the board, and then I want to move it with my keyboard. So that is the next steps that we are going to do. So let's get this up, and let's write a function called move frog. Okay, so this is a function that I am going to write. And what I'm going to do, so each time that I essentially move a key on my keyboard, so we're going to have to listen. I'm just going to console log this out for now. Console log moved. I essentially need to listen out for any time that I press a key on my keyboard. So I'm going to use document, and then I'm going to use add event listener, and to listen out for the event of key up. So there's many you can choose from. There is a list on MDN, there's like click, but I'm going to use key up. There's also key down. And so basically each time I press any key on my keyboard, any key at all, I'm going to invoke this function. Okay, so this is a callback function. If this happens, then this function is called. Okay, cool. So at the moment, if you see here, I'm just going to get the console log up. I can press any key. Moved. Doesn't matter, right? Any key. However, now that I know that is working, I want to decide which keys are going to move my frog, and where it's going to move, right? So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is, first off, let's go ahead and add our frog to the board. So I'm going to make a class of frog as well, .frog. And I'm going to give it the background color of green. And we're going to add this dynamically in our JavaScript. So I'm going to use these squares, actually. I'm going to grab all these squares. So if I go ahead and actually console log all these squares, this is what they will look like. I've literally picked every single one up from my HTML and put it in a huge array or node list, and they are here with the class names. So that's all I have done. And now I'm going to use that. So I'm going to go into my squares array, okay? And wherever I am at the moment, so let's choose which index we want to be in. So I'm going to say let current index equal, and because we start counting from 0, so like this div has index 0, this one has 1, 2, 3. If I say my current index is 0, I should be here. So 0, and if I pass a 0 through into my array, or in other words, as we now know it as current index, and then I do class list add, and then I add the class of frogger, or frog, sorry. Where do we expect this to show up when we press a key? So I'm going to press a key. That's right, it shows up here. Because this is the div with index 0, okay? It is the first div in our array. If I change this now to be 2, it will be, let's press a key, here, because this is the square with index 2, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so hopefully you got that. Let's carry on. So this is going to decide where we start. We want to start at the starting block. So there's a starting block. This actually has the index 76. So let's go ahead and change that to start at 76. So if we move frog, well, I only want to move the frog actually if we press a certain key. So I'm actually going to use the switch case for this. This is the JavaScript switch case. And I'm going to pass through E key. And if the case is arrow left, so essentially what we're doing is passing through the event into our function. And if the event's key is arrow left, then what do we want to happen? Well, at the moment, we're just going to put console log move left, because that's what we want to happen. So maybe make this a bit smaller now. And we are going to break. So there's our first case. Let's do another one. Case arrow right. We're going to move right. Let's do arrow up, move up, and do arrow down. And you guessed it, it's going to be moved down. So let's see if this works first before we do anything else. So now let's press up, getting move up. Let's press left, move right, and move down. So you should be pressing the arrows on your keyboard, and you should be seeing these show up in your console log. This works because we are passing through the event into our function and then getting the key of the event. If I console log out the event, so E is for event, each time we press it, you'll see how much information that actually is. So if I press up, oops, console log is not defined, console log. Let's press up now. See, okay, so this is all that's happening. There's so much stuff. And we're looking through it. We're going, oh my God, there's so much stuff, but I want the key. And the key is arrow up. We could use the key code, but this is sort of depreciated now. So it's safer to use the E key. Cool. So great. Hopefully that makes sense. So how do we move left? Well, to move left, it's kind of simple, really. We just want to be in the index that's -1 of this. So we're going to get the current index, and we're just going to -1 from it. just like so. Okay, and we're going to save it back to index. So we can write it like this, or a shorthand for writing this is just taking current index and saying that -1 equals. So that will now change whatever current index is. So if I press move left, current index will now be changed to 75. Okay, so that's all I'm doing. And to move right, well, we're just going to get current index and we're going to add 1 to it. So plus equals 1. And to move up, well, this is probably more interesting because we're actually going to use the width of the grid. So we know that the width, this can be a constant as it's not going to change, is 9 because we have 9 squares here. So if I want to, so say if I'm here and I want to be in this square here, and this square is index 76, well, this square is obviously 76 minus 9, right? So what even is that? Index 67. Well, we simply minus equals the width, which we know is 9. Okay, so now if we press up, we are essentially making current index. We're getting that value 76. We're minusing 9 from it, which is giving us the value 67. Cool. And of course, then to move down, it's just the opposite. So current index plus the width. Great. So let's see how that looks. Awesome. However, we're leaving a very long thing of frogs behind us. And of course, if we try to move down, we can't do that because there's not any divs. So everything is breaking. As you know, we can't move in here. So let's fix all of this. So before I call each function, I'm actually going to remove the frog from whatever square it's in. Okay, so I'm going to use class list remove. So this means that if I press up, so let's go ahead and start off actually with, maybe we should add the frog class here as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and add the frog class. Okay, so we're here. And if I press up, the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to remove the frog from the current index, so index 76. So I'm going to remove it from here. And then we're going to do all this additions to find out what our current index is based on what key we pressed. And then wherever we end up, we're going to add the frog class again. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Let's see if that's worked. Wonderful. So now we can move around. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is actually limit our movement so that if we go into this column here, we can't move anymore because otherwise we end up on the square on the other side and we don't want this behavior. So similarly to being here, this will cause breakages, okay, because there's no div to go into on the left side. So what I'm going to do is use maths for this. I'm going to use modulus. And what I essentially need to do is say that any square with the index 0 or any square with the index 9, 18, and so on. So any of these numbers, if they are divisible by 9 and leave no remainder, so that's what I'm going to write. So if current index, so whatever square index we are in, index modulus width equals 0. So if this is true, we know that we are either in this square, this square, this square, this square, this square, all these squares. We know we are here. Okay, so if that is true, we don't want to be able to move left, but otherwise we can. So actually what we need to do, as long as the current index does not equal 0, then we get the current index and -1 from it. But if it does equal 0, well then this is not true, so we don't do anything. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. If I replace this with numbers, maybe current index at the moment when we are oops, that should say current index. So at the moment when we are here, we're in current index 0. 0 modulus 9, because we have defined width as 9 here, does in fact equal 0. So we don't do this, okay? Same as if we are here. This square has the index 9, and 9 modulus 9 does equal 0. So this is not true, so we don't do this, okay? However, if we're here, then this statement is true because the remainder will not be 0. So then we execute this, so we are able to move left. I know that might be a lot, especially for those of you who are not familiar with the modulus operator. So please pause here. Maybe get a piece of pen and paper and write down the equation, because it's just maths at the end of the day. Great, so we're going to apply the same logic to the rest of these. Let's do moving right next. So this time we want to move right as long as the remainder is smaller than 8. So if current index modulus width, okay, and the remainder is smaller than width, which is 9 minus 1. If that is true, then we want to add 1 to the current index, okay? Only if it's true. And let's do the rest as well. So moving up, this one will be if current index, this time minus width, is larger than or equals 0. So as long as we are essentially in this row, okay, or anything under it, then we can move 1 up. However, if we're in this row, so essentially if, you know, the index, so for example, let's do this again. So if I'm here, we are in a current index with this index 1. So replace this with 1. 1 minus width is minus 8, right? So minus 8 is not larger than 0, which means we can't execute this, which means we can't go up. However, if we are, let's go 1 down. So this has the index 10. 10 minus 9 is larger than 0, okay? So then we can go up, okay? Because 10 minus 9 is 1, and that is indeed larger than 0. Okay, and one last one going down. If current index plus width this time is larger than width multiplied by width, then we can move down, because essentially we're checking that we're in any one of these squares minus the last row. Again, get out your pens and papers and pads and just literally just try it out yourself. Just go into any of these and be like, I'm in index, square with index, whatever, and see how that works. So great. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm just going to get rid of these console logs and let's test it out. So we should now be able to move everywhere correctly. So we can't, we're stopping there. I'm actually pressing the right arrow, nothing's happening. I'm pressing the up arrow, nothing's happening. I'm pressing the down arrow, find, and stop. I'm pressing it, nothing's happening. And we go left. And great, nothing's happening. I'm not getting any breakages either. There's no like red in my console log. Everything is looking good. Wonderful. So what we need to do next is get some logs moving, right? And some cars moving. So let's go ahead and do that next. So to move the cars and the logs, actually, I'm going to go back in here and give these, we can just add to the class list. Perhaps we should do it by class list rather than ID, as we are going to actually, yeah, okay, let's do that. So let's give all of these an ID. Sorry, a class, and I'm not using ID because I'm going to be repeating these again. So just in here, I'm going to add a new class. This is separate to this class. We need a space. Let's give this L1. Let's give this L2, L3, L4, L5. And now I'm going to stop at 5, and this will become apparent soon, I promise. I just don't think there's any point giving all of these squares in a row an ID when actually we just want the colors of the squares to be changing based on 5 squares. This really doesn't make any sense now, but it will, I promise. So I'm going to give this the ID of L1 again, L2, L3. So now anything with this class is going to have the same behavior, and so on and so on. And let's also do L4. Now the log right, I'm going to start with L5 this time, and then L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, L6, L7, oops, not L7, L1 again, L2, L3. So let's start with the logs first. So what I'm going to say now is that anything with the class of L1 or L2 or L3, the classes of those are going to have the background color brown. And then anything with L4 and L5 is going to have the background color light blue. Okay, so in actual fact, we don't really need this anymore. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to comment this out, because now we're using these classes to color in everything with log left. So there we go. We've essentially made one log, another log, and another log, and another log. And we want these to be going left, and we want these to be going right. And as you will see, this is L1. So all I'm going to do is just change the location so it looks like it's moving left, okay, by literally getting L3 and we're making it move to L2, L2 to L1, okay? So just doing that and doing it again, and so on and so on. But not all the way, because we only really have to account for these, okay? Because from here on, it repeats itself, right? Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. This should move like this one, and then this should move like that one, and this should move like that one. Okay, so we've done that. So what I'm going to do is write a function. So I'm just going to make some space so we can see everything a bit better. So what I'm going to do is write a function called called move log left. And all I'm going to do is use the switch case again. So switch. And we're going to be looking for true statements. Okay. So if this is true, well, what I want to do is actually get, I want to go in here and pick out everything with log left. So we know how to do this now. I'm just going to do this up here. So const log left, plural, equals document query selector all, remember. So just like we did to pick out all the divs in the grid. And I'm going to look for anything with the dot, so the class of log left. So I've just collected anything that has the class log left, and we're going to check if they have these classes. So let's go ahead and grab all the logs left, and actually I'm now going to write another function, actually function auto move logs. and I'm going to grab logs left, and for each of the divs with the class of log left, I'm going to choose to call log left. You don't have to call it log left. You can call it whatever you wish. That is how for each works. And for each of them, I'm going to actually pass them through the move log left function. So each of them will now be affected by this function, move log left. And I'm going to get the log, or the div with the class of log left. I'm going to put it in the function. So I put it into this function now. Boom. Put it in here. And if log left class list contains L1, okay? So essentially, again, what we've done is we've grabbed all of these divs, we've saved it as logs left, and now I've got all of these divs, so each one, and I'm passing it through into the move log left function. So I'm getting a div and I'm checking if it has a class of L1, okay? And if it does, well, what I want to do is get that log left, or the log going left, class list, remove L1, and instead log left class list add L2, because we're going left, so we need to replace it with L2, right? Because L1, yeah, so whatever this one is needs to be there, okay? So perhaps maybe I'm just going to show you how this looks at the moment. So I'm just going to call the function auto move logs, but of course we need to put this in a timing event, right? We need to essentially make this execute, every maybe second or so. So I'm going to do this down here. I'm going to say, we need to put this in a set interval. So I'm just going to put set interval auto move logs, and let's do it every 1000 milliseconds, so every second. Oops, get rid of that. You will see that this has now changed to L2. It's obviously hard to see it on here because they're all the same color, but this has now changed to this, which means we need to change this L2 to an L3, and so on and so on and so on. So we're going to do all of that. So case, in fact, I'm just going to copy this. If it contains L2, then remove L2 and add class L3. And same for L3. If it contains L3, remove L3 and add L4. And we need to do one more, actually two more, sorry. If it contains L4, remove L4 and add L5. And of course, if it contains L5, remove L5 and add L1. So now if I refresh this, you should see them all, the top row, moving one to the left. Ta-da! There we go. And of course, it's doing it every 1 second. So if we look in here, boom, boom. We're literally just changing this to that, this to that, this to that, and it's looking like it's moving. So hopefully you now see why I did that. Of course, you could have done L1, you could have done all the way up to L9, but there's no point because actually the rotation only happens on 5 squares, okay? So that is what's happening. See, if you take any of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then essentially goes back here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it goes back here. Okay, even though it visually doesn't look like it, that's what's happening. So great, hopefully that makes sense. Now that we've done this, we're literally just going to apply the same thing to this row and then the cars. So let's do it. This is good for repetition and good for learning again. So I'm actually just going to get all of this move log left and call it move log right. And we're going to pass through the log moving right. And how do we get this? Well, we need to look into our document and get all the logs moving right by picking out anything with a class name log right. So we're going in here, we're finding all of these. Okay. And once we have our logs right, because there's many of them, I need to get each one. So logs right for each log going right. So for each div, essentially, I need to pass that div through move log right. So I'm going to pass it in right now, log right. Now that's being passed into here. And if this, so we're passing true because we're looking for true statements. So if this is true, however, let's change all of these to log right now. So Control G, we'll do that on WebStorm. Log right. If this is true, well, now we need to go the opposite way. So if it contains L1, we change it to an L5. So we remove L1 and we add L5. So now we're going the other way. If it contains L2, we remove L2 and add L1. 3, 3. So we go the other way, L2, 4, 4, 3, 5, 5, 4. So once again, let's check it out. Of course, we need to, okay, so that's being called in the auto logs writes, log write. And let's see. Amazing. So visually, they're going the other way. Cool. Now let's do the cars. So the cars, let's decide. I guess we want the cars to be smaller, right? Like 2 squares. So let's color that on our board first. But once again, I'm going to actually just add the same. Well, no, because they're smaller, we're only going to have a rotation of 3. So let's go ahead and do that now. All I'm going to do is do C1, C2, and the car's going to just be 1 square, C3, C1, C2, C3, C1, C2, C3, and do the same here. C1, C2, C3, C1, C2, C3, C1, C2, C3. So now let's go in here and pick out that anything with the class of C1 is going to be our car. So let's just give it the background color, maybe like black or something. And then also that means that C2 and C3 are now going to be our roads. So what color do we give the road? Light gray. Let's get rid of these. Don't really need them. There we go. So there are our cars. And now let's make the cars rotate. So I need to go from this one to here, to here, to here, and then change from here to here to here. And same for these. So let's do it. I'm going to go in here and let's write a function. I know I have to auto move cars and auto move logs, but we could just auto move elements instead, right? So that we can just put everything in there, auto move elements. And now let's write a function, once again, like pretty much exactly the same, just a little bit shorter. So let's pick out anything. So const cars left equals document query selector all. I'm going to look everything for the class of car left and do the same for cars going right. Cars. Cars right. Cars right. Cool. So that means logs left. There should be a capital L, sorry. Which means I've obviously done that somewhere else, logs left. Okay, so that means that once again, I'm just going to get my cars going left. For each car left, I'm going to pass it through a function which I'm yet to write called move car left and pass through the car left. And do the same for cars right, car right, move car, right. Okay, so let's write our function. Again, I'm probably just going to copy this because it's pretty much the same. Let's start with the left one. Paste it here. Move car left, and if, let's just change these, so Control G, car left, class list, oops, car left. If car left, class list contains C1, then remove C1 and change it to C2. Again here, C2, change it to C3, and C3, but this time we change this to C1. So it loops, the loop stops there. And let's just get rid of these. And now car moving right. So I'm just going to use Control G, car right. And we go the other way this time. So this should be C3, this should be C1, and this should be C2. Okay, and there we go. Everything is moving. This is looking good. The next thing I need to do is actually decide what's safe to go on and what isn't. And also we need to make sure that we can see our frog at all times. So I can do so easily in two ways. The easiest is probably just to move this down to the bottom so it's the last styling applied. So there we go. You can also use important to override any classes. Great. So I think now probably let's decide what makes something safe to go on or not. So I'm going to write a function to check for a lose. So let's do that. So back in here, I'm going to write a function called lose, and let's define what happens. So what happen if essentially, let's say if you hit a car which has the class list C1, then the game's over, right? Because, you know, the car hit you. But also if you go in the water, you also, the game's over, right? And the water is this one. So if we go in here, if our current index, so where we are, contains a class of C1 or these, then it's a game over. So essentially, if we look here again, so if our current index is any one of these at any point, so say I'm in this div and it has the class list like C1, for example, at any point, then the game is over. So we need to check for this. So what I'm going to do is say if current index, so we need to get our squares, actually all the squares, so all the divs from our board that you remember from before. And if squares, let's go into the array and we're going to pass through the current index. So if current index is 0, we're going to get the first square in our array. And if that square class list contains C1, so the car, well, we know that's a game over, right? So what am I going to do? I'm actually going to get the result display, which we've already picked up out here. Oops. And I'm just going to do text content. You lose. So just like that. And I'm also going to actually stop this. So let's assign this to a ID. I have to do this up here actually. So let timer ID, at the moment it's null. I'm just leaving it as null. This is a shorthand for me doing that. And then we need to assign the sentence interval to the timer ID, which means that if I want to stop this, I just need to pass the timer ID through clear interval. So clear interval timer ID. And let's actually remove the frog. So the frog obviously is here because wherever the current index is, that's where our frog is. So class list, remove frog. Okay. And also let's remove the event listener. So document or remove event listener. So we're going to stop listening out for key up on our keyboard. That essentially moves the frog. Great. And let's check for the lose. Where do we want to do this? I think maybe with the lose piece with here. So each time everything moves, I also want to check for a lose. Okay, so that will be checking every 1 second to be precise. So let's see if that works. I'm just going to go here and then I'm going to go here and we lose because the car hit us. So once again, maybe a bit slower. If I stand here and wait. Okay, we get you lose showing up. The frog disappears, and now obviously we can't move anything. The it's not listening out to our key ups anymore. And even if we wanted to, we couldn't move the frog, I guess, because you know we've removed it. So actually, that's not technically true because we add the class of frog in the move frog function. So we do need to remove that event listener. Cool. So this is looking good. Let's do the same for if he goes in the water. So if this is true, or that's how you write or it contains what is the water, light blue, L4 or L5. So contains L4 or contains L5. Okay. So that is it. Should we try it out just so everyone's on the same page? So let's actually try past this without getting hit. Oh, well, yes. Okay, so we fell in the water. So that is looking good. Great. Now the next thing we need to do is say what happens if we win. And if to win, we just have to really get to the red thing, which is our ending block. So that's the class we're going to check for this time. So function win if squares current index class list contains ending block. Well, then let's also do all these things. So clear the timer, remove the event listener. Maybe let's not remove the frog because, you know, it'd be nice to see the frog. You win, but we do clear the timer. So, oops, let's put this function. Why did I do that? Make sure these are parentheses, so the curly braces. These are parentheses and these are curly braces. Okay, so let's also check for this every 1 second after moving everything. So cool, now let's actually try get to the end. So this is going to be fun. And then I need to stay on these. You win. Cool, and then everything's taken away. So great, the last thing we need to do is just add the timer. So let's do it. Let's add the timer. So I'm gonna start off with the time, let current time, and let's say we wanna do this. I'm just gonna put 5 seconds for now because, you know, I don't wanna wait around loads in order to see if this works, but we can change it to something later. And all I'm going to do is, so we need to show, I'm actually going to do it when we move everything. So in here as well, so each time this function gets called, I want to get the current time and just -1 from it. Okay. And then I want to show it in the time left display. So I'm going to use time left display, text content, current time. And because we hard code the number 20 there, So by the time this happens, we take away 1 from whatever the number that we saved up here is. So maybe let's make this 20 just to make things easier. So it's starting off as 20, but then we call this function and we take away 1 from 20 and we show 19. So this is looking good. I think that should be fine. We also need to write what happens if we hit 0, right? So if, where's the lose function? So another thing that we need to check for is if the current time suddenly equals 0 or is less than or equal to 0, then also we lose, right? Because essentially the game is kind of over. So great. So if that is true, we also lose and we clear everything out. Now I can also, so let me just show you what this looks like. Again, we are going to have to wait till 20, so I'm going to come back to this. We can also hook up the start pause button to essentially pause our timer from counting down. So I'm going to do this by grabbing the start pause button. Let's just check how much time we have left. 4, 3, 2, 1. You lose, okay, because we run out of time and then that's just staying at 0. Cool. But if I want to start the game, because at the moment it just sort of auto starts, we can use the start button to do this. So all I'm going to do is get the start pause button and choose add event listener to listen out for clicks on it. Okay. And if it is clicked, I could write a function. Should we write a function or should we just do it in here? I'll do it in here just to show you that you can also just write the logic of a function here. So start pause button. Why is it not liking this? Does this not exist? Start pause button. Start pause button. Start pause button. Okay. Start pause button, add event listener. If timer ID exists, because at the moment when we press start, timer, this will be null. Okay. So if we press it again and there is a timer ID, we just want to clear interval timer ID. Okay, we want to pause it, else timer ID equals set interval, and then we essentially just move this whole thing actually just to here. Okay, so we move that in here, and we also move the part where it listens out for the key frog. For the movements of the frog, for us moving the keys. So I'm going to actually take this and only allow this to happen if we have pressed the start button. Okay, so whoops. To make this a function, we need to actually do this. So that is now a callback function, and great. So once again, say we are playing this game for the first time. We've just started the game. Timer ID as we set it up here is null. Okay, so we press the button, we click it, timer ID does not exist, so we don't clear the interval. So we just go to set our countdown going essentially. So we auto move the elements every 1 second, and we enable us listening out to key presses so we can move the frog. However, if we press the button again, so at this point a timer ID does exist, right, because our countdown is going, then we stop it, we clear the interval. And whatever time we are left with is the current time. So let's check it out. So obviously nothing's happening, start. So I can move it, I can move it, I can move it to pause. I should not be able to move that. So when I've paused it, I also want to remove event listener. Let's try again. Start, moving around, pause. Okay, and I can't move the frog anymore. And start. Let's console log the time ID to see what is going on. So start. Pause obviously exists. I'm going to press it again. timer ID, we need to assign the value null again. So let's try now. Start. Oops. Start. Pause. Restart. Okay, cool. So actually, you know what? We probably need to check for these collisions way often, because if I'm fast enough, it doesn't register because it only checks every 1 second, right? But if we move faster than 1 second, it kind of doesn't work. So I'm going to move the check for lose and win, and I'm going to put it in its own function or own, sorry, interval. So timer ID, what should we call this? Outcome timer ID, again, equal nothing. And I'm just going to say outcome timer ID, set interval. And we're going to check for wins, loses and wins. So function check outcomes. I'm going to put those in there. And then I'm going to check for this every 50 milliseconds. So you really can't cheat, I guess. So that is going to keep going. And I guess we'll probably clear it here when the game is, you know, paused. Because we don't really need it going, I guess, if it's paused. So let's stop that. And also let's stop it on the lose. So again, clear interval. Clear interval. So now we should check for this way more often. Let's try it out. Start. So now if I, see, it's checking way more often now. Let's refresh. Start. There's no cheating that's going to happen. So there we go. That is the basics, the super basics for the game. Please take this game, improve on it, you know, add levels, or perhaps, you know, you want to be able to start a new game from here instead of having to refresh. All these things you can do. Hopefully now I've showed you how you can take everything you've learned and apply it. Let's do this. Let's try win this. Okay, so actually if I wait here, there should be a empty space for me to go soon. Okay. Oh, I'm not meant to go in the water, sorry. Okay, let's do it. I don't know why I have a result. We don't really need a result. Let's get rid of that. So I need to go on here. And there we go. So I won. I did it. The result, we don't need that to be a 0 because we're not collecting any points. So let's just keep the result as this, and it'll either say we win or we lose. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and I'll see you in the next videos. In this game, we are going to build Connect 4. We're going to take a different approach with this game. We have been working with a lot of modulus. This is a different approach in which we are just going to define which indexes create a match or don't create a match of 4. So I'm excited to share this alternative solution to you to what you have been doing previously. So what are we waiting for? These are the JavaScript methods and properties that you will learn in this section. Okay, so let's do it. As you can see here, I've already have my project set up with an index.html file, an index.js file, and a styles CSS file, which we now have to hook up to work together. I have gone ahead and put in some HTML boilerplate for us. We have a title, which no, will not appear in the browser. It will, however, appear in the tab, which I'll show you later, and a link tag so we can link our style sheet. Now, as our style sheet is in the root of our project, I simply have to write styles CSS to hook it up. I'm also going to put in a script tag, and if you know me, I'm going to show you two ways to put in the script tag. We can put in a script tag at the bottom of our body. So if I just put a script tag with the source, and once again, it's in the root of our project, so the index.js file. So that is what our script tag is linked to. I'm just going to put a char set as well. Whoops. So char set, that one, thank you very much. Now, if you know me, I will now tell you that you can put your script tag at the bottom of the body, but make sure that is after any HTML that we want to put in, or alternatively, you can also put it in the header. So in the head, I'm going to just put it here just to show you another option, because we can also use a DOM content loaded. We can use an event listener to listen out for once everything here is loaded. And some people say that is a more foolproof way. So I'm going to show you how to do it now. As always, the option is up to you. If you prefer to use the script tag at the bottom of your body, that is fine. Just don't use both. Otherwise, you'll have two scripts running. So I'm just going to leave mine here because I want to show you how to do this. You can also use the document and use add event listener to listen out for when the DOM content has loaded. Okay, and then once it has all our JavaScript, we're going to put in between these two little curly braces. Okay, done. Now, let's move on. Now, because I want this to be a sort of beginner lesson, we could use JavaScript to add all these divs for our Connect 4 game, but I'm just going to keep it very simple and put them in here in our HTML. So our Connect 4 game is going to be 7 squares wide and 6 squares high. Okay, but I also want to put in like a secret 7 squares at the bottom, because we want to tell our browser where the bottom of the grid is. And this is just a solution that I thought of. Of course, like, you don't have to use it, but this is just the way that I would solve it in order to build our game. So what's that? 7 times 7 is 49. Let's do it. I'm going to make a div that I'm going to give the class of grid, because this is where all the magic's going to happen. This is going to be our game grid. Okay, so let's call it a class. Now, any div that I'm going to put in here, I essentially want to be or represent the little squares on my Connect 4 game. So as I said, I'm going to need 7 times 6 for the game, but then a secret 7, which we will go into later. So I need 49 of these. So I'm sort of just going to place 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Of course, like I said, we could do this in JavaScript. I do add these divs with JavaScript in a lot of my other games. So if you want to check out how I do that, it's a create board function that I use pretty generically. Please go ahead and check those out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 50 divs. I'm just going to get rid of the last one to make it 49. Okay, now I did say I wanted the last 7 to have represent the end of our, Connect 4 board. So I'm just going to give them a class of taken. Again, you will see why later on. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Great. So we've got a div with a class of grid with 49 divs in it. Now let's actually style it up to see it visually. So because we want to grab the grid, I'm going to grab the class. So use a dot for class of grid. And I'm going to decide that I want all my squares to be 20 by 20 pixels, which means that I need to make the grid. Well, let's first give it a border of 1 pixel solid. And as a default, it's going to appear black, solid 1 pixel black. And then height, I'm going to go with 120 pixels, of course, and then width 7 times 20 is 140 pixels. Okay, and now while I'm here, I'm also going to style every single div inside the div with the class of grid, and I can do so like this by once again grabbing the class of grid, and then every div inside of that, so that's how I would write that, is going to have the following styling. I just want them to be height 20 pixels and width 20 pixels. Now I'm just going to give a background color for now so we can see what's going on. So now if I just copy the copy the path, sorry, and then go to a browser and paste it, you will see there's my grid and there are all the squares. But it obviously doesn't look right? We need the squares to fit in the grid. So I want them to sort of like snake over. So I'm going to do this by adding display flex. So now if I show you what that looks like and refresh, fresh. Okay, now they're in there, but they're all squashed. Look how thin they are. I don't want that. I want them to snake over. So I'm also going to use flex wrap. And there we go. Okay. So now, I think we've got too many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, we have too many, but that is fine. 7 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we need to delete 10 more. 10 of these, let's delete 10. We did a few too many. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Delete. Okay, great. So now they all fit. If I just go over the 1, 2, you will see how they are snaking over. And then of course we have the last 7, which have the class of taken. So they're outside of my grid, and we're just using them to let our code know that this is the bottom of the Connect 4 board game. Is that a board game? You know what I mean, game. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of the background color blue. And while we're here, I'm going to add a class of player 1. I'm going to give it a background color of, let's say, red, and then a border radius, because I'm going to make them circles of 10 pixels, because the border radius on a 20 by 20 square is going to make this a circle. So we've got player 1, and let's make player 2. Let's make here player 2 blue. Okay, cool. So we've got everything we need. Now let's start picking out elements from our HTML and our JavaScript so we can work with them. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually pick out the squares. So I'm going to save them as squares. I'm going to use document query selector all, thank you, tab 9, to pick out, and once again, this is going to be useful because we just learned this, to pick out all the divs inside the div with the class of grid. So that's how I would do that. So we've just picked out all the squares. Now I also want a way to, I guess, tell the user whose go it is. So I'm going to use an h3 tag for this. And I'm just going to write the current player is player. And then I'm going to use a span tag to just interrupt that h3 tag. And I'm going to hard code a 1. And I'm just going to use an ID just in case we want to use another span, right? So I'm just going to put current player. And while we're here, I'm also just going to put a place we can show the result. I'm going to leave it empty for now and just give an ID of result. Okay, so that's looking good. And in here, let's also pick out the result. So const result equals document query selector. I could use get element by ID, but it's totally up to you. I'm going to use query selector to look for an ID. So we use a hash for ID. We're looking for the ID of result. And another ID we need to pick out, which is the display for the current player. So I'm just going to display current player equals, once again, we get the document, whoops, and I'm going to use query selector again, just to make everything consistent. I'm going to look for the ID and save it for our JavaScript. Okay, we also need to let our JavaScript know who the current player is, and we hard-coded 1, so I'm just going to put this here 2. I've used a let, as this will not always be 1, it might be player 2, so that's why I used a let there. Okay. Now, I think the next thing I want to do is add an on-click to all our squares. Okay, so I want essentially something to happen every time I click any of the squares in our Connect 4 grid. So I'm going to use a for loop for this. Oops, making sure that I'm in the curly braces. For let I equals 0. And now, because we're dealing with the squares, I could use the square's length. That will mean even including all the taken squares. And I think that's fine. Let's just carry on and see what happens. Okay, so for each of the squares in my grid, sorry, I want to get the squares. And then for each one, because we're looping, so I'm going into the array and I'm looping, I just want to add an on click. And then on the click, and we need a function, so I just use an arrow function. For now, I'm just going to make an alert that says, you have clicked square. Just so we can see what's happening, I want to show you. So I'm just going to use the I and save. Now let's refresh. So if I click here, oops, you have clicked square 13. Let's refresh. I'm going to click the first one. You have clicked square 0 because, as you know, we start arrays from 0. Okay, so this is working. We have added an on-click to each of these squares, including these ones, but for now, let's just ignore it. We'll decide what we want to do with that later, but I think that's fine. Cool. It's pretty fun, isn't it? We know exactly which square we have clicked. Okay. Okay, so we actually don't want this alert. I've just done that so you can see what's going on before me coding any further, because I think that is important. Okay, so delete. Well, the first thing that we want to do is decide how we're going to solve this. So obviously in Connect 4, when you drop the little token, we need to account for gravity, right? So I think let's do it that if the square below your current square that you want to go is taken, you can go on top of it, right? Simple. So that's why we added the class of taken at the very bottom, because at the moment we're going to write something that says you can only go on that bottom, so only on this row, because all of these have the class taken. So if the square below your current square is taken, you can go on top of it. Cool. Just going to minimize this because we don't need it. So how do we write this in code? If we go into our squares array, I'm just going to use I, but I'm going to add 7 because I want to check what's directly below the current square that we are at. So we do that by adding 7 to the index number of it. And then if that square class list contains taken, well, we can go, right? So I would do it like, oops, this. So if that is true and the square directly below us is taken, if the current player equals player 1, thank you, tab 9. If the current player equals player 1, don't know why it keeps formatting like that, I don't like it. Well then to that square, so once again that square, I'm going to add the class list. I'm going to add taken for one, because it's obviously taken. But I'm also going to add, so square list, class list, add player 1. Okay. And then of course we want to change it to player 2. So current player equals 2. And then let's display it. So display current player inner HTML, and let's just display whatever the current player is because we've just changed it to 2. So let's actually show that visually to our user. Okay, click. Okay, cool, it's changing. Okay, now it's player 2's go, so we can't do anything. So now let's write some logic for if it's player 2. If current player equals 2, well then essentially I'm just going to copy this really because we're doing the same, but just we're going to add player 2 and then change it back to player 1. Cool. And then I'm also just going to add an, like an else, because we've got these if this, or we could just, we might have to do an else if, I think we might have to do that. Okay, yes, we might have to do that. Else if, else alert, can't go here. Okay, so now change player 2. Player 2 goes. Now it's player 1 again. Woo! Player 2. Oh, can't go there. Where's my alert? Where's my alert? It's annoying. What did I do? Ah, right, I put it in the wrong place. Else if alert. Okay. So now 1. Can't go here. Can't go here. But player 2 can go there. Can player 1 go here? Yes, it can. So awesome. So that's why I did the else if. If I just got rid of this and just did an alert, well, obviously, yes, I know I can't go there. I can click here. It'll just tell me I can't go there even though I can, because it's sort of like executing this and then executing that anyway. So that's why I did else if, else. Cool. Okay. So we've done that part of the logic. The last thing I need to do is check the board for wins. So I'm going to do that with a function. This I do actually want to execute every time we click. So there's no need for else if. We just want to check the board every time we click on a square. So now let's write our function. I'm going to do it up here, of course, because we need to write it. We need to write the function before we use the function. So function check board, like so. Now, this might not be like the most, I guess it's a lazy way to check for wins. I mean, if you want to, I guess, make this cleverer, please do and share it with me. I just couldn't be bothered. It's a small board, right? So I've just gone ahead and figured out all the winning combinations on it. So please feel free to take this. I'm going to obviously put it in my GitHub, but I've just got a winning arrays array. Again, if I've got any wrong in here, I'm sorry. Let me know. But const winning arrays. And there we go. So I have literally just pasted all the possible winning arrays. So by using my index number, of course, on our board. Once again, if you can think of something clever, then please do. I'm really lazy. This was fine. Okay, so we've got our winning arrays. Now let's actually use them in order to check our board if any of the players have a winning array. So to do this, well, again, I'm just going to use a for loop. So for this time, let we can use I, we can use Y, like it's totally up to you, whatever you want. Okay, so as long as Y, I'm going to get the winning arrays length. It's going to loop over, but we're going to loop over each one of these, right? We're not looping over this. We're just looping over 1, 2, 3. Each of these, so however many of those are, that's however many times we're going to loop and increment by 1. Now, I think it's always important to use const as much as possible. We don't want to use a let. This is blocked scoped. So that's why I'm using a const. We're going to save, for each time we loop, we're going to save square 1, square 2, square 3, square 4. So I'm literally just going to name it square 1, squares. For square 1, we're going to go into the squares array this time. So it's const square 1. Well, let's just say we want to get the index 13. We need to go into our squares array, and then I'm going to literally pass through. So I'm going to go into the winning arrays and go into the, so I'm going to loop over the first one. So let's just say we're doing our first loop. I'm going to grab this. So I'm going into the winning arrays, going into the array, and I'm grabbing this, and then I want to get the first item from it. So I need to pass through a 0. So that is how I would do that. And whatever that is, I'm saving as square 1. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I'll talk you through it again. We now need to get square 2. So what I would do is, of course, we're checking on our squares grid. So if I've just checked this square on our board with index 0, so for example, let's go back to our board. Say I want to check, this is what we're checking square with index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're checking those. So of course I would then need to go into my squares array. I'm going to go into it, and then I'm just going to pass through this value. So I need to now get this value, which is a 1. So I need to go into my winnings array. This is an array. So y still, because we're still in the same one, so whatever y is going to be the same for this. So winning arrays. And then I need to get the item with index 1, so 0, 1. So this will return. All of this essentially is returning back 1, the number 1. Okay, so I'm going into the squares array, I'm going into the squares with index 1. Okay, so hopefully you get that. I'm just going to carry on. If you don't, please feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to explain further. And one more, of course, because we need to check for 4 matches. And there we go. So we are looping, we're grabbing all 4 squares that we want to check. Okay, so now we want to check those squares to see if they all have the class of player 1. Okay, so if I mean, this is probably the easiest way to do it. I'm gonna go if squares 1. I mean, we could do another loop, but it's only 4, so I don't think it's worth it. But please feel free to do another loop if you wish. I'm just gonna go squares class. If that first square that we picked out, if it has a class that contains, oh God, contains player 1. So if that is true, and the second square contains player 1, how do I do this so it looks neat? There we go. And the third square contains the class of player 1, and the fourth square contains a class of player 1. And if all that is true, well then we want to get our results that we picked out. Or is it result? Whoops, don't want that. I think it was result. Okay. We want to get our result and use inner HTML to say player 1 wins. Okay. And of course, I mean, let's just copy this for player 2. Just make sure that that's an if statement. I'm just going to copy all of this actually. So we have the pseudocode as well. Oops. Okay, if, I'm just going to use Command D to player 2 wins. Okay, I think that's all we need. Whoops, we did this outside of our for loop. So I'm just going to get all of this. Right, here's our function, okay. But then we need to actually put all of this inside. Okay. Just going to make sure if, then this, oops, then otherwise this. So that is our loop. Great. I'm just going to format this a little bit better. So just go Command. So just tab it out and click Save. And there we go. So now we play the game. Just need to make sure we can only add players if that space is not currently taken. Okay, now let's play. So now we play the game. And we get a 4, so there we go, 3, 4, ta-da! We have now finished our game of Connect 4. You will see that the game works. Okay, so that is how I would build a game of Connect 4 in a super simple way. Please do feel free to take this game, make it your own, style it up, give it extra levels. If you could think of a funky way to not have to write out all the winning arrays, then please do let me know. Like I said, I was pretty lazy with this and I just stuck them all in there because I thought, you know, like it's a small grid. Thanks so much again for watching, and I do really want this to be a conversation, so yeah, please do show me your games. Okay, nice. Later. In this next section, we are going to be building Space Invaders. This game is a classic, another retro classic, in which you, as the little guy right here, have to shoot all the Space Invaders coming down before they get to you. Okay, so a lot of timing events here. It's a grid-based game, so a lot of stuff that you would have already covered is going to come up, a lot of modulus work and so on. So these are the JavaScript methods and properties that you will be covering in this section. Let's do it. Okay, so to start off, I have actually already pre-made my file. So the HTML file with some boilerplate. I've named my project Space Invaders. I have linked the style sheet to the style CSS file, which currently has nothing in it. And then I've also linked the JavaScript file too, making sure that the path names are, of course, correct. Okay, so that is my boilerplate done. Apart from that, I have nothing else in here. So this is where we're going to be starting off. Are we ready? Let's go. Okay, so the first thing I'm actually going to do is in the body, I'm going to make a div and I'm going to call it grid, or give it the class name of grid, so we can style it up so that we can see what we are working with. And in the style sheet, let's just make a grid. Now I'm going to actually pre-decide that all my squares in here are going to be 20 pixels, which means if there's 15, it's going to be 300 pixels. So width, 300 pixels, height, 300 pixels. And then I'm going to give it a border, solid, black, 1 pixel. Okay, so just save that. And now if I open this up, so copy the path, paste that. Okay, there's our grid. It's going to get the console log out too. Essentially all the magic's going to happen inside there. And then we're also going to get these squares. So I'm just going to perhaps make sure that every div inside the grid, that's how I do it. That's a class name. And then in here, each square is going to be, what do we say, 20 pixels, 20 pixels, height 20 pixels. Okay, so that is looking good. The other thing I need to do is make sure that when they go in here, I'm going to use display flex. I want them to wrap around each other. So flex, wrap, wrap. Okay. So now let's go to putting some divs inside the grid. I'm going to use JavaScript to do that. So to this, I would have to get the grid. So I'm going to go const grid equals, and then get our document. If I can spell document, not create element, but document query selector. I'm going to look for the class of grid. So make sure that's a class and store that as our grid. Now I'm going to use a for loop. Let I equals 0 to essentially put 225, because 15 5 times 8 is 225 squares in there. So that's a for loop to do so. And then for each time it loops, what we're doing, I need to make a square. So const square equals document. And this time I won't create element, but I want to create a div. And then I want to get the grid, and I'm going to use append child to put the square I've just created inside my grid. So that should work. Let's just check it out. Refresh elements. So now if I look in here, let's see, you will see 225 divs have been created and put inside my grid. Let's carry on. Okay, next up, let's actually get the invaders. So alien invaders. And then I'm just going to make an array, and then use the indexes to figure out which indexes I want to essentially put the aliens is. And I'm going to make it 3 rows of them. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22, 23, 24. So I think these indexes, okay, and then 0, 15, 30, because it's 15 by 15, 22, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. Okay, so that's looking fine. Those are the indexes I want my aliens to be in. So now I actually need to get all these squares. So I would do this. I'm going to do this up here after I've put in all the squares. Const squares equals document query selector. But this time I'm going to use query selector all to search for all the divs inside my grid and save them as squares. And then I might as well just use array from to make an array of this. So now let's put my invaders actually in the squares themselves. So I'm going to write a function for this, function draw. And then in here, another for loop. So for let I equals 0, as long as I is smaller than the alien invaders length, because we want to loop over all of the alien invaders, increment I by, we increment I. Okay, so we're over each of the aliens. I need to go into my squares array. I'm going to pass through the alien invaders I. So I'm essentially going to pass through this each time. And then I'm going to use class list add, and I'm going to make an invader class. So the invader class, well, invader, let's just give it a background color of purple. And then let's just make it a circle. So border radius 10 pixels, because I'm going to be taking that and adding that to it. So let's just see if this works. So I'm going to add the class of invader. Okay, so now if I go draw, just call that function. Okay, great. We've got all our invaders. Now let's get to drawing our shooter. So once again, I'm going to go into the squares array. I'm going to pass through a random number. So let's just say 200. Class list add shooter. Once again, I'm just going to copy that and just write shooter and make this red. Let's make it a square though. And then go here and refresh. So 200, maybe we want to add 2 more. So to make it more central, so I'm just going to put current invader, oops, shooter index, not invader, shooter index. And then I'm going to save the number 202 to this. Let current invader index 202. So now this should be in square index 202. Great. This is looking good. So we've drawn all of them. I think the next thing we should do is actually get some stuff moving. So let's actually start moving the shooter. So function move shooter. Okay, so for this, I'm going to be using keys on my keyboard. So I'm going to pass through an event. The first thing I want to do is actually remove the shooter. So we've got draw shooter. No, we don't. Okay, I'm just going to remove the shooter. So from wherever he is, we want to remove the shooter, wherever he is on the board. And then I'm going to use a switch to essentially switch out the key that I am pressing. So this is a switch statement, and the first case is going to be arrow left. Just spell arrow left correctly. That's the first case. If current shooter index is modulus with, so we're just checking if it is not equal to 0. So as long as the shooter is not on, so if it's divisible by factor 15 and leaves no remainder, we know we're at the right hand edge. Okay, so as long as it's not 0, then we can move our current shooter. One to the left, okay, because it's -1 in the array, we're just going backwards 1, and then we break, and then we need another one. So this time it's case for arrow right. Okay, so if this time, let's get the current shooter index, and this time if it's modulus with, and that is smaller than 14, or like in the first case 14, so essentially this time we are checking if it is, as long as it's not in the right hand side, then our current shooter index can move right. So we're essentially just adding 1 to it. So hopefully that makes sense. And then we break out of it. And then we need to redraw the shooter in its new position. So outside of the switch case, I'm just going to add him again. Okay, so that should work. And I'm going to link this up to an event listener to listen out for not clicks, but each time we press our key down on the keyboard. And then we want to call the function move shooter. So let's test that out. Okay, so pressing left, and that is not working. Width is not defined, right? We didn't define width. That was silly of us. Let width of the grid be 15. Okay, so now it's going to move, and it's going to stop because it hits the edge. Move is going right, and then it stops. Okay, so that works. Let's carry on. Now we need to move the invaders. So function move invaders. So now actually that worked for here. We defined the left edge, and we've defined the right edge. But I'm actually going to define it and store it now. So left edge equals, and this time we're going to go into our alien invaders array that we made, and if the first of the alien invaders is modulus width, and that deeply equals 0, okay, so that's how we know we're on the left edge, because we're in the left column, because all these values modulus will give you a remainder of 0. So there we go. Sorry, of course I'm rushing this because it's a speed thing, but definitely do look into modulus if you don't know much about it. I do a bit of it in my course. So once again, let's check the right edge, and to do this I would get the alien invaders length. So I'm passing through essentially whatever the alien length is -1, because we're working from 0, we're putting it through the array. And if the very last invader is in a column where modulus width -1, then we know we're on the right edge. So essentially we're just sort of rewriting these two in a different way. So we've just defined our left edge and our right edge. Once again, we're going to have to remove the invaders. So actually, we've got a draw invader here. I'm going to make a remove invader too by copying that and pasting that. And I'll call it remove. Remove. Okay, so I'm going to remove the invader. The function is called remove. So I'm just literally going to write remove the invader first until we can do our logic. So this time, well, let's just maybe focus on the aliens just moving in general. So I'm going to do this by, okay, so for let I equal 0, so I need to loop over each invader and assign it a different position, right? So alien invader's length. So we're doing it for each alien invader in our array. Okay, now we're going to get the alien invaders. Oops. Pass through an I, because we need to count for each one, and just add a 1 to it. Okay, and then I'm gonna just draw the invader. So now let's put this on a set interval. So I would sort of do it like this, set interval, and then I'm going to put move invaders, and let's do it every 500 milliseconds. So let's see if that works. Refresh. Okay, so great, they're moving, but they're obviously just moving one way. And they're going through everything, so that's not great. I'm going to swap this out to be direction. Okay, and I'm just going to put let direction. For now, it's a +1, but if we change it to -1, it will go the other way. So that's something that we need, that's some logic we need to do. And I'm going to put this on a ID so we can clear it. Invaders ID, yet invaders ID. So I'm not, that's just null for the moment. Okay, so we've got that so far. The next thing that I would like to do is actually do some logic. So I'm going to do that above here. If, okay, so let's do for if it's at the right edge first. So if right edge is true, if our last invader is in the right edge, okay, well then we need to essentially make all of them go down. So I'm going to write a for loop again for let I equal 0. I'm just make it go down and change direction. So I invaders length, and then I plus plus. So we're going to loop over that, and once again I'm just going to get the alien invaders, and for each alien invader I need to essentially just add a whole width to it. So add 15, so whatever indexes they are, I'm going to add a width, but then -1. So why is this not liking that? There. So I'm moving them down, and I need to change the direction. So now direction is going to be -1. So, okay, let's see if that works. All right, and we're in the right edge, and then it goes down. Okay, so it's going down, and it's changing direction. Cool. Okay. I mean, it's changing in the weirdest direction because it's going there, so we don't want it to go there. +1. Cool. Oh no. Why is that doing that? Direction -1. Huh. Because we're still on the right edge. Okay. Okay, well, let's make another. If it's in the right edge and it's currently going right. So let's put let going right equals true, as it always starts off going right. So if it is going right, then add the width, change the direction, but immediately put going right as false. Okay, so there, and then going right as false, so it goes the other way. Okay, great. So now that we've got that, let's do for if is at the left edge and is not going right, because it's going left. Once again, let's get a for loop for let I equals 0, and then I is smaller than alien invaders length I plus plus, so just a for loop. So we can go over every invader. So we're going to go into each invader, and for each invader, or invader index specifically, if it hits the left, I also want to add to its width. But this time, well, let's just see what that looks like. And then I need to change the direction this time to be 1 and going right to true, as I need to change the direction. So let's see what that looks like. I have a feeling I know it's going to go down in the wrong place. So go down, go left. Come on, come on, come on. Yeah. Okay, so let's actually make it go back 1. I was right to do that. And I'm pretty confident that, so let's carry on. So that is good. We're accounting for it, so it should go all the way down. I think the next thing we need to account for is if it hits the invader. So down here, if squares and the current shooter index class list contains, and if it contains invader and shooter, so if whatever square we're in contains both of those, then, well, let's just console log for now. Game over, and then we would need to clear interval invader ID, whatever I called it. Come on, invaders ID. Okay, so now if we go all the way to the bottom, I mean, I don't have time for this, this is rushed, so I'm just going to put this to 100. So there we go. And I should get console log saying game over as soon as we hit here, because both will be in the same square. Yes, game over, great, cool. And everything stops. Brilliant, so that is looking good. So instead of this, I'm actually gonna get a results display in HTML equals game over. Now I actually need to define what is a results display. So const result display equals document query selector, and I'm going to search for something with results, or a class with results. I could do an ID, that is totally up to me. It really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go class results, so you can style it up later, and I'm just going to default it to 0, sorry. Okay, so that is fine. We've got our game over. The next thing that we want to do is, I guess if we hit that, but what if we just go to the bottom, right? So this time if, actually no, we don't want to do that. Let's do another for loop for this, for let I equals 0. As long as I is smaller than the alien invader's length, we want to get I and add increment I. Okay, now if alien invaders I, if it's larger than the square's length, we get, well, we can just use this again. So let's see if that works. I'm just going to get rid of the shooter for now. Let's just see if that works if it hits the bottom. So see if we get a game over. And game over. Oh, okay. We get a game over there. Why is that? Is larger than the square's length. plus width. So let's try again. Huh. Put that like so. Ah, it's because what is happening here? Let's inspect it. Invader, invader, invader. Plus, let's just go 100. Let's see what happens. Okay, we'll come back to this. Maybe it's fine that we keep it like this and we'll just change. Something's obviously happened, but I'm fine with this for now. We can do some changing later on. Okay, so we get a game over if it gets around there, and then we do clear interval invaders ID. Okay, so we've got it getting a game over when we hit roughly the bottom. I don't know what is happening here. Let's just go console log squares length. I'm just gonna go like that, and then see what that actually comes up with. If okay, let's move that actually up here because we need to know what it is. 225, okay, and then here I'm just gonna console log alien invaders I. See what number it goes up to. It goes to 209. Just gonna console the other one out as maybe it's something to do with the Space Invader and the current index. Ah, it is. Okay, fine. So that is actually because it's my fault, even though we got rid of the styling for the shooter, we still have the current shooter index there. So if it contains these two, we get a game over, and that's why it was stopping it. So this actually works, it's fine. Let's carry on. That's my fault. I didn't realize that this was affecting what was happening, and it wasn't anything to do with this for loop at all. So that is fine. We finished that. We get a game over for if we hit the shooter, and we get a game over if we hit the bottom of the grid. Okay, so that is looking good. Let's go on to our next part. Our next part is going to be all about shooting the aliens. So I'm just going to move that up there and write a function called shoot. Okay, so for this I need a laser ID, just like we had the IDs for other ones. We need a laser ID now, and then let current laser index, so wherever current laser index. So wherever the current shooter is on our board, that is where our laser is going to start from. Okay, now we need to move the laser from the shooter to the alien invader. Okay, so once again, I'm going to write a function move laser. Now I'm going to go in. So once again, I need to remove the laser from wherever it is. I'm going to use the current laser index to remove. I know we haven't added it anywhere yet, but we always need to remove something before we draw it in a new location. So remove laser, and then we're going to get the current laser index, and we're simply going to move it up a whole width. Okay, so we're going to minus 15 from it, and then we're going to redraw our laser. So that's it, really. Add laser, and then what's our laser going to look like? Well, I think our laser is just going to be, let's just make it a orange square. So orange. Okay, so that is our move laser function. However, we need to actually hook some timing events onto this. So I'm actually going to put this. So that's going to move our laser. And then let's put this maybe on a event listener. So document add event listener, and if I press key up, I'm gonna shoot. You can have key down, whatever, it doesn't really matter. As soon as you press the key down, it was going to shoot, but we only wanted to shoot. So once again, I'm going to do a switch case for this, key, and if we press, I don't know, arrow up, let's do arrow up, sure. So if we press that laser ID, I'm going to actually put this on an interval. I'm going to move the laser, so this function 100 milliseconds. So why isn't this move laser? Oh, that's because it shouldn't be in here. Let's be here outside of this function, because that wouldn't make any sense. We need to call the function, but it's still inside this function. So let's get to doing that. Now if I press key up, there we go. 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 Nice. Now let's get to adding some. Why is it not liking this? Cannot reprogram and find line 98. Line 98. Move laser. Okay, well, it seems to be working for now. I'm sure I will fix that when it comes to it. So now let's think of collisions and what happens when we actually interact with stuff, right? So if the laser is in the same square as an alien. So if squares current laser index this time, class list contains an invader. So if it's in the same square as an invader, well, then we need to remove the laser from wherever it is. We also need to remove the invader from that square, and we also need to let's add a boom. Add boom. Okay, so we're using the current laser index. Whatever square we're in, we need to remove the laser, we need to remove the invader, and we need to add a boom. And what should our boom be? I'm literally just going to make it a square boom. I actually think this should be red, so let's make it red. And let's make this one, oh my God, I don't know now, running out of colors, green. Okay, so hopefully that works. It's sort of not really removing anything. Okay, let's see why not. Ah, that's why. Squares. I misspelled squares. And shoot. Okay, cool. I'm getting booms. Nice. Boom, 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 boom. If we hit it, we get booms. Okay, let's carry on. So this is giving us errors because we actually have nothing to remove, but for the next time there will be. So I'm just gonna keep that there, even though it's giving us errors. Okay, so next up, we actually want, so once we do get a boom, we want it to disappear after some time. So I'm going to use a set time out for this and essentially write a function in here that will, so our function is going to be squares current laser index class list. I want to remove the boom after, let's say, 300 milliseconds. Okay, so now the boom is going to disappear after 300 milliseconds. And so it's disappearing. Not very well though. Okay, and then I'm going to clear interval laser ID. So I'm going to stop to see if that works. Okay. Okay, so now the laser's disappearing in a much better way because I'm stopping the laser ID from running. Okay, it hits something and it disappears rather than carrying on. So that's good. I mean, it's still not getting rid, I mean, it's getting rid of the invader, but it's being redrawn. So we need to actually take care of that. Okay, so let's actually get rid of the invader from our array so it doesn't get redrawn. Const alien removal equals, let's get the alien invaders array, and then I'm going to use a JavaScript method called index of to pass through the laser index, so the square where all the collisions happens. Okay, whatever square that is, the alien's going to be whatever square that is, the alien's going to be removed from the aliens array based on that. So const alien removal, I'm going to get the alien invaders alien. Okay, so we need to actually let's make a array, an empty array where we're going to literally collect all the aliens that we have removed. I think that should work because we need to be collecting them. So aliens removed equals, so let's actually do that up here. Let aliens removed, and for now it's going to be an empty array because we haven't removed any. And now I'm going to actually get, so I'm going to get that array and I'm going to push the alien removed. I'm just going to go alien removed because it's singular and I'm putting it into the aliens removed array. Okay, so hopefully that should work. We're going to remove it from the array and I'm going to store it. Okay, so let's have a think about this. I'm going to be storing all the aliens removed. So if I console log aliens removed, if I shoot, okay, I Okay, cool. I'm removing all of them. Obviously, I'm removing 24 each time because I keep removing it because it hasn't actually been removed. So this time, we're going to get this aliens removed. And this time, let's get our draw function. Right. Now, let's have a think about this. Where is my draw function? Here. Okay, so before I draw it out, I actually need to check. So if the alien invaders removed does not include I, so whatever we're moving over. So if I shot 24, index 24, and that's included in here, then I don't want to draw it. So I'm just going to talk through this again. So if whatever number I'm passing through here, so say it was a 24, and if that's not included in my aliens that have been removed, I can add the class of invader. Okay, so that should hopefully fix the issue. So now if I shoot, great. Okay, now if I shoot it, they're being removed. Cool. Now let's move on. The next thing I need to do is simply check for a win. So a win will be easy essentially if, where should we do this? Let's do it in here. And then I can just simply go if, and I'm just going to use the aliens removed array length to do this. So if aliens removed length deeply equals the alien invaders length, well then we know that we have won. So I'm just going to put you win and then clear interval invaders ID. Okay, so that should do it. I guess we sort of need to add a score too. So each time we remove an alien, I'm going to put results ++, and then let results, I'm going to start with 0. I'm going to add a score, and then we're going to also display. So we're going to add one to the result. If we remove one, I'm going to get the result display inner HTML. I'm going to put results. Okay, so let's check that out. Okay, so we're getting the scores, and then hopefully I can kill them all before they get to me, but I doubt it. Okay, let's try. I'm going to maybe slow it down a little bit so we can play it normally, and then let's see. Okay, if I do this, the game is over and we have won and we have finished the game. As long as it says you win, then I am happy. Come on. Well, I'm not very good at playing this, clearly. Just going to stick around here to do it. No. Oh. And once more. Come on. Okay, I can do this. Come on. Really playing for the win here. No. Oh my God. Okay. Well, I'm pretty confident that we have won. Let's just slow it down even more. Maybe I'm going to really slow it down because I just want to get these done now. I want to show you that we have completed the game essentially, and that we can stop the timer. Okay, so if you're going to try to compete against me, we need to see that you win as well. Otherwise, how do we know that this game is finished? We don't. I mean, there could be a bug that I haven't identified yet. So as long as I get these all off. If you want to add levels, this is a great way to add levels. Yes, and we did it. Done. I have finished the game. I've finished Space Invaders. Finished. Woo! Okay. Hopefully you can beat my time if you want to have a go at doing this yourself. Speed coding Space Invaders. Okay, super simple. There's your game. Go forth, go share it. Please do tweet your finished games only to me on Twitter. I would absolutely love to see what you have built, how you have taken your game to that next extra level. And of course, if you want to try beat me on the speed coding, then please do that too. Okay, thanks so much again, and I will see you soon. And congratulations, you did it. You finished building your games. Once again, please do share them with us on Twitter. I'd love to see what you've made. Please tag us. Please tag your solutions. Save them in CodePen. Save them on GitHub. Perhaps deploy them. And I can't wait to see them.